David Forde, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Will. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's funny. If someone said to me, David Forde, what's the first thing I think of? Ireland, Sweden. That's where I go. But reading your book, you've had a very interesting career, not to say a very interesting life as well.
Yeah, my career has been, as a professional footballer, unorthodox. You know, I didn't go through the whole academy, and as a young kid, working my way through, I've been a builder, a baker, everything bar a butcher probably. So, yeah, to have my career and you know, now to be an author, which is another limb that I never thought I'd hear the day I'd say that, but here we are. So,
yeah,
it's exciting times.
What I enjoy about the book is there's kind of like, I guess, two strands to it, or two narratives running side by side, in my mind anyway, which is the underdog sports story, obviously. As
Yes.
you mentioned, you know, going from Galway United initially, then, you know, making a breakthrough in England, and which took a long time, coming back to Ireland for a period and then going back over. And then you also talk about, I suppose, some personal issues, your personal battles, you know, controlling your anger and aggression. You write about a couple of incidents in the book, and they're kind of two different things kind of going side by side throughout your career.
Absolutely, and especially the work I do now, I started to realise that my personal life and my professional life weren't two separate things. It felt like, you know, I was bringing my personal life into my professional life and vice versa. So getting to that kind of place and writing the book has been such an experience because it's been so cathartic. Even though it's taken me so long, also it's been very catalytic. It's allowed me to move forward. It's allowed me to look back into the past, look back in the right way, deal with that, understand it, get the learnings, get the lessons from it, get the blessings from it, and absolutely start living my best life. So it's been, it's, you know, everybody has a book in them, and honest to God, I'd highly recommend everybody do it. At least write it anyhow.
Yeah. So, like, obviously people will know you from your time playing with Ireland, Millwall predominantly, I guess, in your club career eventually. Yes. When you settled down. I suppose the things I was referring to there, you write about incidents in the book of kind of having fights with teammates, having fights with your own manager at times, kind of things that in the book, I suppose, quite jarring as a reader. Like, you know, I wouldn't have known that side to you. Maybe, yes. I'm not sure how well known maybe other people did, but I was kind of, some of the incidents you describe in detail, I was actually pretty, like, taken aback.
Yeah, no, I get that, you know, and it's like, I would have fought with anyone. I would have fought with someone in an envelope, like, you know. But really, it was just a show of it was a projection of the internal fight that was going on inside myself. So much conflict going on inside myself, and throughout my career, I was desperate to be successful. You know, I was so desperate to play for Ireland. I was so desperate to have a professional career, and it all started coming late to me. So it drove me into, you know, battling with my ambition and that kind of searching for meaning in between. And the funny thing is, like what you said, everybody has that side inside themselves, but it's hidden away, it's locked away. No, everybody wants to show their light. Everybody wants to see the good side. And everybody would always say, David Forde's an absolute gentleman. And everyone had a perception of who I actually was, but what was going on in the internal world versus the outside world. And when that got triggered, by God, did I spiral, you know, and I went to absolute DEFCON 5 stations, you know, absolute nuclear.
Yeah, like you write, as I said, you write about it in depth in the book in various instances, which we can touch on. Like, where do you think that anger comes from?
It's a great question. And now looking back at it, anger for me is the root of loneliness, isolation. And even though having family, friends, wife, kids, your career, everything else around myself, when I started to understand that deep inside of myself, there was huge vacancies inside my personality, and I couldn't understand where it was actually coming from. You know, yet to be, you know, we can be so close to somebody, but yet even we're sitting here, but there can be a massive gulf. So me, by doing that, looking back and going back into my youth, going back into my childhood, going back understanding the relationship with my father, all those different elements, his relationship with alcohol, it all started to become apparent in terms of, all right, these are the roots of where that anger actually stems from.
So you're kind of like acting out a bit to a degree to deal with maybe a bit of loneliness?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And it took me 2 years to actually realize that. You know, a gentleman told me, he said, you know, the roots of your anger is your loneliness. And I was like, what are you actually talking about? That actually makes no sense. But it was only when I got to that place when I actually realised that how much I'd emotionally abandoned myself. Emotionally, yeah, fit and strong as a man, all those different things. But there was more dimensions than just being a physical man as an athlete. I had a mental body, an emotional body, an energy body, an intellectual body. So many parts of myself I didn't actually understand. So being what I would call emotionally illiterate or an emotional Neanderthal when it came to certain degrees of understanding my emotions, I just couldn't express an emotion. And even looking at anger, I didn't actually even realise that anger was actually an emotion. So getting to those layers and getting to those dimensions, it started to show so many levels of fear that was inside myself. And out of that place then to defend myself and to defend my sense of my identity, well then all I really knew was, you know,
Conflict.
go and fight. Yeah, exactly. Go fight your space.
There's, I suppose,
And whether that was verbal or whether that was physical, it's the same thing.
there is like some sort of cliche about goalkeepers as well. You know, that they're kind of like they're prone to, I don't know, like kind of a bit of
The lunacy.
yeah, like did being in goal maybe exacerbate that at all? Do you think?
Yeah, totally, yeah. It was there was a part of it as well where it was nearly expected at times. You know, there was clubs and managers.
Oh, Millwall, I'm sure I'd be.
Exactly. I found myself at the right place. You know, so it was a great time at Millwall, and like what you said, there's always been that I suppose stereotype around goalkeepers are mad and goalkeepers are lunatics, and even that when you look at the role and you look at struggling with isolation and loneliness, it's the most isolating and loneliness. So it's a projection again of a deeper root of that.
Yeah, like the book isn't all about that. There's also like great moments of the book when you kind of make your breakthrough, and there's one particular part of the book that I think kind of the two narratives come together.
Right.
That's when you're at Barrytown.
Yeah.
You've gone from Galway United to Barrytown. You got a bad contract offer from Galway, and you were basically like, I'm out of here.
Done.
You get a move to Wales, the Welsh League, where Barrytown play. It's going okay. It's not going badly. It's not going unbelievably.
Yeah.
You have an incident in a match where you and a teammate come to blows.
Yeah.
You basically punch him and get an 8-match ban, a red card.
Yeah.
You think your career is over. You probably think you'll be on the next plane back to Galway. Your manager, through a connection with West Ham, says, look, David, we're going to send you into West Ham for 2 weeks maybe you were initially going to go for?
Yeah, he said go down there for 2 weeks.
Train. Just a train.
Yeah, don't say nothing about what happened.
About what happened. I don't want to ask, say
yeah.
you're recovering.
You're on trial,
and then
yeah.
what happens at the end of that 2 weeks, I had myself punching the air. I'm like, this is a proper like sports film like turn of events.
Yes.
You can maybe explain to the listener kind of the whole story from the Barrytown red card to what happened at West Ham.
Yeah, it was, looking back at it now, it you can laugh about it now, but it wasn't so funny at the time. Kind of give you some context of it. My grandmother had just passed away, and I'd kind of more or less lived with my grandmother as well at times, you know, staying with her nighttime and different things. So she'd passed away, and she was a big influence in my life. I was always afraid to go to England. Everybody said, oh, you've got great potential. That word used to even trigger me in itself, because I was like, no one could actually tell me what my potential was. There was always a but at the end of it. And everything after the but then was a bit of a lie. So I've gone over to Barrytown, and Stuart Morgan, who is Harry Redknapp's chief scout, his son Scott was playing for Galway United. He had signed for Barrytown, and they were looking for a goalkeeper. So he said, look, you've got a better chance of being seen. Obviously, he came over to watch his son play, seen me playing in Terryland one night, and he was like, this goalie's actually got something. However, you're in the west of Ireland and coming closer to the UK, obviously being in Wales, you have a better chance. So they rang up, gave me a call, would you like to come and sign? I went and signed. So my biggest fear was always, you know, moving away. I came to Dublin under 15 playing for Belvedere, and I even found that really difficult. And all my mates, Dara Sheridan went to Aston Villa, Ryan Casey went to Swansea, Tony Folan went to Crystal Palace, Colin Hawkins went to Coventry. So I had so many friends. Rory Ginty went to Saltell. I had so many friends and ex-players and people I would have played against in Galway that would have went across to England at that time. What they did struggle with was homesickness and loneliness and all that element, and speaking about that through the relationship with Ryan. So I was always quite afraid of that, even though I came across later, they go at 15 or 16. So I found it even difficult at 21 years of age. So we're coming up to Christmas. It was my first Christmas away as well. I was seeing a girl at the time. That wasn't going so well neither. So there was a lot of kind of things. Pressure was building. Pressure was mounting. A lot of FOMO going on. You know, the fear of missing out. I was missing weddings, parties, nights out, all the crack. But yet driving with my ambition because I so wanted to play for Ireland. But yet I wanted to belong in one part. But in the other part, I wanted that freedom and success on the other. So getting across, we've come into the game. It was live on BBC Wales. And my friend Ryan Casey, who's now the assistant manager with John Russell up in Sligo. And he scored the win, or he scored one of the penalties when Ireland, the Euros back then with Roy Keane and all that. He scored one of the penalties, but anyhow, he was watching it down in Wales with his mates. He said, "Oh, my mates playing for Barrytown tonight. We got to watch this game." Next thing they're watching the game. Next thing it comes up to half time. Lee Jarman, the centre half, who's about 6'5", ex-Cardiff City player, gives me an absolute hospital pass. I come out, it was a 70-30 at best. I managed to clear it. Their player came in. I managed to roll the tackle and I jumped back up. It was a bit of a leg breaker, but I got away with it. And I said, "What kind of pass is that? You know, sort your pass out." And he pushed me. And I was like, "Who are you pushing?" And he pushed me again. And the second time he pushed me, I just went. Red mist came down and wasn't even in me right mind, because you're in the middle of a game as well, you know. Never mind your pressures off the pitch, there's also the pressures because Barrytown were the top team in Wales. They were fighting for Champions League. They were in the Champions League. There was, you know, money problems and we had to be winning, and so there were so many things on field as well as off field that were just all starting to it was like a volcano basically just waiting to erupt. And then obviously I throw my right hander. And my mates are just, Ryan's losing his mind down and thing, actually going, "This is going to be on Question of Sport one day." And I'm still to this day can't believe it hasn't been on there.
Just to come in for 1 second, because I don't want to interrupt your story, but like, because some of the moments, like, we're kind of like smiling, because like some of it is funny, like, as in, I don't know what it says about me as a person, but as a reader, when I was reading some of these stories, but then you kind of take a step back, you're like, "Oh God," but that is, underneath the immediate kind of humour of you and a teammate going to blows, you're like, there's something underneath that actually isn't funny.
Yeah, well, look, my type of nature is that I actually externalised it, or I'd verbalise it. I'd bring my anger out, which is actually a vent, or it's just, it wasn't what I did, it was actually how I was actually doing it was the problem. The biggest problem, and why I feel with so many people why it's so jarring, is the fact that they actually want to do it, or they're feeling like they want to do it, and they push it down and suppress it back down. So when you read the book, it does start to stir those emotions or those feelings, because everybody's been in that situation. Everybody's been in that place where they've been like a boss, a leader, a teammate, whoever it actually is. That gets stirred up and you're just like, "I'd love to just go swing it." And in our nature as human beings, and all around our survival mechanisms and all those different things, that comes to think. Plus we're Irishmen and we're warriors and we're Celts and all that stuff, so we can blame it on that.
Yeah, so okay, you get the red card, it's a big deal, and then this West Ham opportunity comes about.
Yes, so I'm lowered in the snake's belly in the changing room, and thankfully there was I still can't think of her name, the doctor's name. It'll come to me one day. And she came in to check on me. She came down for the next couple of days to check on me. She was like, "Everything okay?" And in my mind, I was just, "I'm done."
You think you're going back home?
I'm done. Yeah, I've made my mind up. Right. I'm going back up. And there's nearly a level of self-sabotage in that, you know. And manager calls me to the office on the Monday morning, comes in, reads me the riot act. Kenny Brown Jr., ex West Ham, Norwich. His dad was Kenny Brown Sr. from West Ham also, West Ham legend. And he said, "I'm going to find you 2 weeks' wages." And I was just looking at him going, you can have all my wages, because I am on the first flight back to Galway. I can't be having that in my changing room. And I said, "Look, totally understand. That's, you know, totally undermine the whole situation. I can't be striking out with my teammates. That is, in any circumstances, not right." And but yeah, still felt horrific inside myself. The self-loathing that went down. I felt lower than a snake's belly. So next thing he turns around and he said, "I'm going to find you 2 weeks' wages." And I said, "You can have my wages." And next thing, the handbrake, he did the biggest thing of a 360. Like, it was like, hang on a second there. Whoa, hang on.
It's funny in the book when the way you're trying whoa, let's not be hasty here.
Don't, where are you going? Because what happened was there was a load of clubs watching. There was a lot of scouts watching. And the funny thing was, every one of those clubs that were watching that day, I actually end up spent time at that club. Millwall, Portsmouth, or else I went on trial with them at some stage or another. And obviously the club was struggling financially, and they were thinking, right, we can make a few quid off David. So he must have just thought on the spot, right, what do I have to offer here? How do I keep him?
Yeah.
How do I keep him here? And he was like, right, you're going down to West Ham for 2 weeks. Picks up the phone to West Ham straight away. And he's like, right, I'm bringing David down. I know you're interested in signing him. Why don't you take a closer look at him? And
you didn't know that part of it, did you?
No, I'm there. I'm in the office as he's doing that.
Yeah.
And they're like, have you not got games? And he was like, nah, you can have a look at them and everything else. So next thing I find myself in his car driving down the M4, and I'm rocking into West Ham. I train on the Tuesday, was it? And Tuesday, I trained 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday. And on the Thursday, Glenn Roeder calls me into the office and he offers me a contract.
Because to set the scene as well, this is the year West Ham ultimately got relegated that year, but with a great team. Like this is star-studded West Ham. What Di Canio,
most points ever.
David James. You say you're spending time with David James, Shaka Hissop, like Premier League guys, like proper guys.
Yeah, established.
And like you're seeing Paolo Di Canio over here. Defoe would be there. Carrot, you go from like the lowest of the low to like all of a sudden you're rubbing shoulders with A-listers, and then you get offered a contract. And I was like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
I was actually like, this is actually crazy.
Yeah.
Like this has happened.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Like you're League of Wales, and I always felt League of Ireland was a better league than the League of Wales. So I don't know where you'd even class in that scale. So now you're gone from League of Wales and you're in the Premier League. And that was like trying to get me head around that and work through that. And you're walking in, and as you said, it was the West Ham team that had the highest points total that ever got relegated. The year before they finished kind of seventh, the best.
Oh, the team is class. Like
it was unreal.
The top half of the table, Premier League.
Michael
team.
Carrick, Joe Cole.
Yeah.
It had an absolutely unbelievable team. And
because you mentioned that, like when Glenn Roeder called you in, you thought it was thanks for the 2 weeks.
Thanks for coming.
Go back to Wales.
Yeah, it's
and he's like, I want to offer you what, like £1,800 a week, and you're like, am I dreaming here?
Unbelievable. Yeah, I was on 350 sterling at the time, and actually I'm on 1,800 quid a week. And 6 months before that, at Galway United, I was on 50-50. We used to call it 50-50. You'd have 50 quid basic, 50 quid appearance.
Okay.
And now all of a sudden, and I'm going around Galway merchandising with a Coca-Cola jacket on for Cadbury's, doing a bread run. I was doing all sorts of mad things. And next thing I'm on 1,800 quid a week, which was probably about 3, 4, 5 times of what my dad was earning at the time.
As I said, that was the moment of the book. I was like, that was my favourite moment, because it was just like a surreal turn of events that you like. I can only imagine what it was like to experience, because just reading it, I was like, Jesus, this is crazy. Like,
yeah, this is off the Richter scale. Yeah, how quickly life can turn.
Yeah,
when you least expect it.
Yeah, and just the mental image of all those West Ham stars there at the time as well, and you just coming in like from not mentioning that I'm serving an 8-man span at the moment.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm going in and I'm going, wow, I'm signing from Millwall, and now all of a sudden I had to Kenny was like, whatever you say, don't mention what happened. So next thing in the papers and the press, they were like, West Ham are signed in a Welsh under 21 international, and they were building it up to this whole thing, and I didn't really realise at the time. And then I'm thinking, before I get called up for Ireland, Gary Speed rings me going, we're calling you up for Wales. And I'm like, I'm not Welsh. And they're like, well,
where did the Welsh thing come from?
I don't know.
There's people, because he came from League of Wales.
I came from League of Wales, and they all assumed. And I never really thought at the time to nearly bat it out. And sure, no wonder it probably took till I was 31. Everybody thought I was Welsh.
Yeah.
But I knew the Irish people knew I was Irish.
So you were your West Ham time. Then you're kind of like a backup goalkeeper. You go out on loan, I believe, and then kind of Glenn Roeder, he has that illness, he has to step away, the club get relegated. Alan Pardew comes in.
Yeah.
And another really interesting part now I found was, so they get to the playoff final.
Yeah.
Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
And Alan Pardew, who I want to talk to you about generally, but first, this story kind of tells you, real casually, if we win on Saturday, you have a new contract next season. If we lose, you don't.
You don't.
And the backdrop to this is, on the day of the game, you have your daughter's communion, is it?
Yes. What had happened was I had met Ali. My grandmother used to always say I'd meet my wife at a wedding. Meet her at a wedding. She had Michaela, who was 5 at the time. So we had kind of been seeing each other over and back from Galway. She was coming over, I was going back. And it was coming that final year, my contract at Millwall. We get to the playoff final against the Palace team, Ian Dowie, that came from the bottom of the league straight to the top. And he brought everybody, bar myself and Elliot Ward, to the playoff final game. It was in Cardiff then, because of Wembley was being redeveloped. They'd called everyone down and said, right, everyone get their suits fitted. So we've all walked down, and next thing it was like, oh, we don't need you, Forde or Elliot. And we were like, well, we're not going. So that was a bit of a low blow. However, you get over it. They were all getting ready to head down to Cardiff for the few days to prepare, and I was like, well, I'm not staying here in London for the weekend. It's Michaela's communion. I said I can go home for that. So I went down to Alan and I said, Gaffer, I said, sorry if I go back to Ireland. It's Michaela's birthday, and it was just a manner in which he said it. You know, he said like, right, fair enough, appreciate that. You can have a contract. There's a new contract there for you if you get back to the Premier League. We're going to need 3 goalies. However, if we get beat and we're in the Championship, there's no contract there for you. And I said, right, well, do you know what? I'm going to have to find it out. I'm not getting picked for the suit, so I'm off home to Ireland. Then he said, I want you back on Monday for the parade, for the bus. And it was just nearly just the arrogance in which it was said. It was probably him just being confident. I felt it was arrogance, thin line and all that. And I just had a feeling in the bottom of my stomach. I was like, we're actually not going to win here. Even though we're massive favourites, I
remember that well. And then ultimately Crystal Palace do win.
Yeah.
Neil Shipperley.
Yeah, tapping.
Yeah.
Neil Shipperley.
And like all of a sudden this great West Ham team they stayed together for the 1 year, didn't they? Like, so it was still all the good players were still there.
Some of them had left. David James had left, but they still had, they should be getting promoted.
You're kind of following the game while also at the communion. You're kind of like trying to impress the in-laws and stuff, and then you also have this hanging out. I was like, that must have been a weird day.
Yeah, and then people coming over talking to you about football and what's happening at West Ham, and this day is happening, and you're trying to get to, involve yourself in that space, and then obviously the game, and you don't know where you are. You don't know whether you're in England or whether you're in Ireland, or your career is so up and down. And the funny thing is that I'm thinking, right, am I going to be finished here? What am I going to do if this doesn't happen? Because you always think the worst. I used to always absolutely catastrophize situations.
Yeah. What was Pardew like generally? Was he as ridiculously kind of, as you say, arrogant that he appears from the outside?
Look, when I felt small on myself, I felt he was an arrogant man. And the more I've grown in myself and I started to see that he had, whether it was a masquerade or a mask, and whether it was ultimate confidence, the way he conducted himself and went about himself, I can totally understand how that can get muddied without really knowing him. So like that, he was a manager. He was in a tough job, tough position. He knew what he wanted. He knew what he came in, and he made certain changes and stuff like that. Like, so that was kind of admirable. So to be honest, I don't really know the man. He was there for a certain period. I was out on loan. So it'd be unfair of me to really comment on his character. It was just in terms of those moments. And it's not really about, like what I say at the start of the book, it's, the whole element of the book is not necessarily about anybody else or what anybody else did to me.
Yeah.
It's more or less about what I did to myself, the amount of times I'd betray myself. And learning from that, and that's really what the ultimate story of the whole book is actually all about, is taking that ownership, that sense of responsibility, and learning from it, growing from it, and seeing it for what it is. Yeah.
So after West Ham lose, you don't get the contract, you go back to Ireland, you decide you want to become a teacher, and you kind of go down that avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And then Stephen Kenny kind of gets in touch.
Yes.
Why did you not want to stay around in England? Because I think you get a call from someone offering you another contract, and you're like, no, I'm going on. But why didn't you want to give it another go with another team?
Leroy Rossinier was manager of Torquay at the time, and I remember walking out, black bag. I just went into the change room, got my boots, got my kit, got whatever I could, and I actually had the car loaded up from my apartment as much as I could in the back of the car. So I grabbed my black bag and I'm walking off. Leroy Rossinier rings me, and he said, David, he said, want to sign you for Turkey. We're in League Two. It'd be a good start. You're still 24, young goalkeeper. Get into the league." And I was just so disillusioned. I was so disappointed. The homesickness, I just didn't feel comfortable there, and I was just wanted to kind of go home, start something new, start something afresh. And I found out that the whole experience was quite a difficult 2.5 years. Because inside myself there was a huge part of, well, am I actually even good enough to be at this level? There was oftentimes I'd be in training, oftentimes I'd be in the middle of Upton Park warming up before a game thinking, I'm not ready, I'm nowhere near ready. And there was a lot of times I didn't actually realise how young I was. You know, I felt that if I'm in that position, I should be ready and willing to step into it. There was none of the sense of, well, this is a process, this is a journey, because anyone within my circle wasn't really in that space to bring me through those stages of development within inside myself as a professional footballer, but also as a man, as a young man.
Yeah.
I didn't have that sense of support within it.
It's funny then, so you go back to Ireland and it's almost like you went from kind of Galway to Barrytown to West Ham. Now it's like you're back in Ireland. Stephen Kenny gives you a call for Derry, and it's like you restart the process again.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I'm a big believer in the only way to truly gain something is to lose it. And I just lost love of football. I just given up on it. I was like, right, I'm done with soccer. I'm not. This is too hard. I thought, right, I'll go back home to Ireland. I'll go back to NUIG as a mature student, which I got in as, doing geography, history, sociology, politics, and philosophy. And the funny thing is I got in, I started doing my studies, and I was like, right, I'm really enjoying this. I'd always loved Gaelic football. I always loved to have won in All Ireland. I'd always loved to have played at Croke Park. I always loved to have played centre field for Galway and field balls. I used to love field.
You wouldn't have been a
balls
keeper?
Catching. No, centre midfielder. I used to love playing centre midfield in Gaelic football. And so I'm there. This is the new plan. This is the new pathway. I had applied to build a house in Galway. My dad comes from Turlockmore, and he had some land, and he was like, right, here's a site. And I thought, right, happy days. I can set up home here, I can build. And the funny thing was, I applied for it 3 times and never got it. So obviously it wasn't meant for me. So Stephen touches out, and he says, right, I need a goalkeeper for the last few games of the season. Do you want to come up? And he drove all the way down from Derry. And I thought, right, that's fairly admirable. Had a great conversation. He sparked something in me again that, even though I was still so hurt and disappointed, and I was trying to kind of push it away and not really deal with it, but I knew there was unfinished business. I knew there was still, my dream was still alive of playing for Ireland. That's all I wanted to do, was just play for Ireland. It wasn't necessarily about playing in the Premier League. It wasn't necessarily about anything else. My fundamental dream from a young lad was just putting on the green jersey for Ireland. All the other parts of it was, right, if I play in the Championship, play in the Premier League, obviously you've got a better chance of playing for Ireland. So go in, decide, right, I can drive up on Stephen really understood me. He really understood that, right, obviously he's licking his wounds. He needs a bit of time. He can just come up, play on a Friday, go back down. It's towards the end of the season. And ignited that in me. And then the following year they were going full time, and then he sucked me in, hooked me in, and I was up and down full time.
Yeah. And Derry goes well. You get some good European days, right? You play PSG, which must have been epic at the time.
Yeah, Pauletta was playing for them. They had an amazing team.
Yeah.
Landro, the goalkeeper. We beat Gothenburg, which was an insane result. They had a load of Swedish internationals. Alex Anderson has played for Everton. We beat them 1-0 away, and then we beat them back in Derry. Then we beat a Gretna team who'd got promoted from the Championship to the Premier League in the SPL, and they were fully confident that they were going to beat us. I think we beat them 7-2 or 7-3 in aggregate. And then obviously we get Paris Saint-Germain, and we have a 0-0 result. I think it was 0-0. Yeah, it was 0-0 in the Brandywell, and then to beat us 2-0 over in Parc des Princes. So
good day out in Paris.
Yeah, it was a great day. Yeah.
Yeah. So Derry goes well. You get the opportunity to go back to the UK. You go to Cardiff initially. Funny, actually, you haven't been in Barrytown. You're following like similar paths, but a step up. And then eventually a few more ups and downs, and you go to Millwall. Millwall, the opportunity comes about. And that's, I suppose, when your club career really takes off.
Yeah.
You play, I think, over 200 games.
342.
Over 300 even. Yeah, even better. And it's funny, like obviously the West Ham links, like even though you were kind of a backup goalkeeper, like you write about an interaction you have. I think it's after your first game, like you come out, a little kid, Mr. Forde, can I have your autograph? You're like, oh, this isn't too bad. Next guy, you're utter scum. Something like that. That was the yin and the yang.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't forget.
Yeah. Oh, they don't forget. No, they don't forget that tradition. It goes back to the Dockers. So basically, West Ham Docks versus Millwall Docks, and the West Ham Docks were the English Dockers. The Millwall Docks was the Scottish Dockers, and they had the Navy, and obviously they started playing football, and it started actually from back then. So when you start to see how ingrained it is in their psyches and in their nature and in their families and their heritages, it's huge, it's massive.
Was playing for Millwall like as crazy as it seems from the outside it might be? Like, is it like really full on intense? Like the fans are like, could kill you 1 second, could love you the other second? Absolutely.
It's it gets a bit of a bad rep. It does get a bit of a bad rep. It's an amazing club with amazing people. One of I speak about it is Veronica Quinn, a good proud Irish woman from Dublin, from Rathcoole. She's been there nearly 40 years. She was there when Mick McCarthy first went to the club, and she's still there. She's like my fairy godmother. So the club itself is, like what you said, it has a reputation, and all they want to see is just someone to come in, put their shoulder to the wheel, give the shirt, everything. Like we played a game one night against Birmingham, and Zigic was playing, and I think he was on in the championship like 60 grand a week, and no wonder the club went bust. And he was an absolute totem pole, and we had, I think, 3 players sent off at the 10, and they beat us 6-1. But everyone that was on that pitch put in an absolute shift, even though we got absolutely mauled. And next thing we walk off the pitch to a standing ovation.
Which was the 3 red cards.
Yeah, it was the 3 red cards. There was that as well, but it was more the fact that we didn't actually give up. We actually just kept going. We kept fighting. We kept battling, and that's what they wanted to see. And once you give your heart and once you give your soul to the club, you know, they loved you forevermore.
You're right about a match you played, I think, in the League Cup against West Ham. And you can imagine what happened there, but it sounds like a pretty crazy experience.
It's probably the last major riot in England, it's coming up to nearly 20 years. It was 2008 in the Carling Cup, and it absolutely kicked off outside Upton Park. It was absolutely bedlam. There was 3 or 4 pitch invasions. There was a man stabbed, nearly killed. There was bricks and bottles flying. It was...
How did it feel to be like in goal for that? Like, you know, it's happening just behind you or around you.
It was quite surreal. It was like you're nearly having an outer body experience. You're going, is this actually happening? Because you're trying to focus on the game, and it's a big game, obviously, the magnitude of it. And we should have won that game. You know, we conceded 2 goals kind of late on, and either side of full time and the extra time. And then it was the kind of game that was going on in the terraces and outside as well. So you hear about these hooligan incidents, but for myself, I don't know, was it just out of my own naivety or stupidity or whatever, or that I'd been at both clubs, I felt relatively safe in that environment. So it was nearly a reflection of what was going on inside my internal world was nearly being externalized, and I was kind of like, oh, this is familiar.
This is normal.
This is normal, yeah. So I'm walking off the pitch going, right, this is interesting.
Yeah, because I suppose I can't remember what stage it was of your Millwall career. Another kind of flashpoint in the dressing room. This time it's your manager, Kenny Jackett. You kind of have an argument, and you describe like kind of going at him to kind of strangle him.
Yeah.
And another incident you mentioned in Cardiff, I think Jason Byrne, again on the team holiday, you get into a fight with him. So this is when you're a good bit older than when you were at Barrytown.
Yes.
And the incidents were still happening.
Yeah, old habits die hard. And like that, it was all got to do with defending my whole sense of my reputation, my whole sense of identity. I'd fought so hard to get there. And if anyone tried to threaten to take that off me, well, God bless them. That's because like that's what desperation does. That's what survival does, and that type of survival mechanism to hold on to a jersey, especially as a number one. And you look at it and you think, right, you're there in 92 football league clubs, and you're one of those goalkeepers. There's not many positions actually out there. So anyone that tried to take that away from me after fighting so hard, I didn't understand. I understand how to fight physically, but I didn't actually understand, well, how can I actually verbalize that? How can I express myself emotionally? How can I express myself mentally? How can I express myself intellectually? Because my physical security was there, but zero emotional, mental, intellectual security. So now developed in that, it's like, well, now I don't need to fight.
At what stage did you like kind of learn to, I suppose, deal with the anger, or have you? As in, is that now no longer a part of your life, or is it still something you like? Are there still flashpoints where you're involved?
No, I've done a lot of hard work on that, and that probably started in my early 30s. I started to realise, right, I'm doing my dream job. I'm getting in the Irish team, a lot of pressure, number one for Millwall, all those different things. And I thought, right, still, I got so professional, I just lost the fun and the joy in it, and I was kind of thinking, I'm doing what my dream is, and there's no enjoyment, there's no fun. So I went in search of that, and that led me down into a path of healing, in terms of looking at different therapies, alternative medicines, studying all different cultures, different ways of the art and science of living. And I thought, right, there's definitely something in this. Ultimately, what I started to realise was the power of the mind. And if I can get my mind strong and get my mind fit, Lord knows what I could have been. And I look back, not with regret now, I can look back and actually realise, well, this is actually a part of my journey, because what the book is about is to understand the mind in terms of my emotions and my feelings, and what it drove me to do, and what it at times self-sabotage, but it also allowed me to do some great things. So I had to turn my mind into not just my greatest enemy, but my best friend. I started to realise that I'm with me 365 days of the year for hopefully the next 40, 50 years. Who knows? Could be tomorrow. Who knows? Yeah. But right now I'm going to enjoy my experience, and I'm going to become my own best friend. I'm going to be so comfortable in my skin that this is me. I wanted to get to that place of my authenticity. Who actually really am I? Because I was sick of trying to be someone else for so many different people. I'd lost myself in so many different avenues. So now getting to that place of myself, and the work I do now around coaching, mentoring, personal development, healing, all that type of work around the mind has led me to that place, because it's like pulling roots and pulling weeds. You get to pull those reeds, and you get to pull those roots. So now sitting here today, I definitely feel that I've healed and mastered a lot of that. But however, you never actually know what's around the corner. Someone pulls a knife on you, you never know what you have to do.
Well, then I don't think people will begrudge you flipping out if someone pulls a knife on you, to be fair. You mentioned, I suppose, when people kind of threatened your number one spot or your career, you really maybe that kind of was one of your triggers. Because one of the parts in the book that's interesting, but it must have been difficult for you at the time, is you think of professional footballers and the money they earn, and do they even bother looking at it? But for you, you weren't on outrageous money, you were on good money, but you had a mortgage, you had a family, and it's like every little win you get in negotiating a new deal, you're kind of like cheering along with it, because you can feel that it was pressurized just to provide for your family. It wasn't just like, will I buy a second Ferrari? It was it was literally like, I need to have a mortgage paid and I need to pay it.
Yeah, exactly. And plus it was coming off the back of 2008.
Yeah, the crash,
The crash, and making some bad investments and not have any savings, and it was just pressure all the time. Mortgages, where we're going to live, having a young family, and there was all those modern day pressures. And even though you're playing football, and the whole perception would have been, you're extremely successful, you're earning extremely good money, that applies to a small percentage of footballers. But everybody has this whole perception of, you're playing football, you're a wealthy man.
The book is particularly good at illustrating that side of it, I think.
Yes, yeah.
It's a great insight into I suppose, a different side of football, as you say. Like the guys who were like good and doing well, but not like outrageously well off.
Yeah, exactly. And unashamedly, no problem expressing that or talking about that. And even getting in with Ireland, that was such a contrast, because my esteem was, and a lot of times in football, people's esteem is attached to the league that they're actually playing in, and also to their wealth and their money. So, it doesn't necessarily add up to the substance of a person, no matter the amount of money that they're actually earning, or to the player that they actually are. So there was huge parts in that where me getting into Ireland, going, right, I'm sitting at the table here with Robbie Keane and Shay Given and Richard Dunn, and these are on massive money. So now all of a sudden, because of my low self-esteem and my self-worth, I started placing people on pedestals, and that was unfair on them. That was my projection onto them. But at the time, I didn't actually understand that. So straight away, I totally disempowered myself. I totally had them there, and I was here. And even though after a while you get into it and you actually realise, hang on a second there, I'm as good, if not better. And depending on the opportunities that you're given, and luck and destiny and all those things come into play, then you get in, you start playing for Ireland, and you're getting man of the matches, and your game goes up to whole different levels and different dimensions inside myself. And I was actually like, Jesus, I'm so hard on myself. And I always was. I was always very, very hard on myself. So getting to that part inside myself and realising that, you don't need to be so hard on yourself, David. Even getting to those lessons inside myself were major.
Yeah, the Ireland portion of the book is enjoyable as well. Like, walking into the hotel for the first time, it's like a very grand surrounding versus what you'd be used to, and you just see like Trapattoni and Tardelli talking over there, like real animated Italian-esque kind of like about football, and you're like, yeah,
pinching the fingers.
And as you said, like the other big stars of the team, and then I think you the oldest player to make their competitive debut for Ireland in history. So like that shows, if nothing illustrates better than the long journey you were on to get to that stage than that.
Exactly. And you're walking into the room and you're looking at, back then, you probably had Ferguson. There was no Guardiola or any of them back then. Like, you had Ferguson and probably Trapattoni. Trapattoni was the godfather of management. You're thinking, wow, I'm walking into the room and I'm shaking hands with Giovanni Trapattoni. And next I look beside him and it's Marco Tardelli. And it's the one moment from, is it 82? When he scores the World Cup winning goal. And I'm shaking the hands here of the man that shook the world. That's probably the greatest celebration ever, where just the passion and the expression of that. And you can see, even them just talking, you're just looking at these men, you're thinking these lads are absolute luminaries of the game. So that experience in itself, I'm sweating and my palms are sweating and I'm trying to wipe my hands dry, and he's probably thinking, geez, he's my number one goalie, and he's got sweaty palms. It's probably not going to go down too well. That whole period was mind-blowing.
Yeah, and you get to start that friendly against Italy. I completely forgot about this game until I read the book, and I was like, I remember that. Actually, that 2-0 win. It's kind of during the summer, kind of a bit of a random friendly.
Yeah, it was a random win
for you though. Like starting in goal for Ireland, and you beat Italy. Perlo was playing. I looked at the team sheet before I came in. Chiellini in defence, Perlo. So there was a couple of heavy hitters there.
Buffon was on the bench.
Yeah, so that must have been unbelievable.
It was next level. There was 42,000 at this Dufrance Stadium in Liège. And we were kind of like, well, are we going over to Liège to play a game for?
But Trapp has organised it like kind of an...
Exactly, but apparently Belgium and Liège has expats from there's a lot of Italians over there. So for some strange reason, they picked it there, and there was a massive crowd and a few Irish people, and I couldn't believe I was starting. This is, bear in mind, I got called up in probably the March, April, May, June. 3-4 months later, I'm making my debut for Ireland.
But like some of those friendlies, when you play a really strong team, sometimes it could be 3-4-0 defeat to get a 2-0 win as well. Like, one of those great footnotes. Like
exactly, and everybody goes, it's only a friendly. And to be honest, professional footballers don't necessarily go out to do friendlies. I know they mightn't get the result, or because it's a friendly, they might be, offered a % or two, and that's all it takes. It's not as if the players have decided, right, I'm going to take 20-30% off the accelerator. Like a 1% margin in elite sport is major. So most professionals go out there to win and give it their best. And we went out there that night, and Keith Andrews scored an absolute pearler into the bottom right corner. Coxie taps one in on the back post, and I go off into the sunset of the summer going, what actually, my life has just exploded.
If you hadn't played for Ireland again, it still would have been like a great innings.
Oh yeah, and that's all I ever wanted was one cap.
Yeah.
Martin Byrne, I love that man. He was one of the security guys, and Bobby Ward, Tony Hickey. They were working with Tony at the time, and I walked in on my first day into my first camp, and Martin used to sit outside the escalator, and I'd be like, "Oh, how you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm Martin Byrne," and I was like, "How are you, Martin? What's the crack? How are you?" And he goes, "Come here, how many caps do you want?" Straight up. He was straight in, like, straight up, no kissing. And I says, "1 cap." And he says, "You'll get to 20 to 30. And I was like, Jesus, if I get to 20 to 30, I'll be absolutely delighted. And I was like, "What are you actually doing?" He says, "I'm here security." And I said, "Why? So many people tried to get in." He was like, "No, I'm trying to keep the lads in."
Well, he was spot on in his assessment. He got 24 caps in the end, I think.
Yeah, 24 in the end. Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier, like, the Sweden game was one that stands out. You went into to Euro 2012 in the squad as well.
Yeah.
So you got some good days out of it.
I got amazing days. And then Trapattoni making me actually Ireland's #1. That was another layer in itself.
Was that a conversation? Did he come out and was it like, kind of, or was it just kind of it just happened gradually? Or did he come to you and say, "Dave, you're my guy"?
I can't recall a time where he came and said it. I think I read it in the papers.
He just said it, or it was
I think he
the
just,
journalist?
I think he just said it. He came out and said it in the papers, and I was just like, right, okay, fair enough. Here we go. And that was some experience as well for someone like Giovanni Trapattoni to turn around and say you're actually #1 for the goalkeeper or #1 for Ireland. Looking back at it, there hasn't been actually that many #1s. So it was a very privileged position.
It's funny because I look back on that qualification campaign just before we came in, like just to look back after I looked at the Sweden game, like, the 2 Austria games, like Ireland weren't actually as far away as getting a playoff as I remembered. Obviously Alaba scored the equaliser in Dublin.
Oh, that's a killer.
From outside the box.
That still haunts me.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. And then away from home, he scored with 5 minutes to go.
Yeah.
So, like, those results, easily Ireland could have been a little further.
We were, honest to God, we believed we were going to Rio. I believed we were going to Rio. I was like, right, I'm playing in a World Cup. I'm going to be playing in Rio. And I was like, right, here we go. And I'll never forget that night at the Aviva. We're 1-0 up. We got the draw 0-0 away to Sweden. Then we brought them back in. We go 1-0 up at the Aviva, and we're absolutely cruising. Or 1-0 up against Austria, sorry, should I say. The 1-0, we drew 1-0 back with Sweden. So we're Austria, last few minutes. Paul Green gets the ball, goes down into the corner flag. Robbie makes a run into the box. He goes to pass to Robbie, and I'm there actually going, just go into the corner flag, waste some time, fall over, do whatever you have to do, just keep the ball down there. They break, and David Alaba at the time was playing centre midfield. He was left back for Real Madrid.
Quality, yeah.
What a player.
Unbelievable, yeah.
What a player. He drives up through the middle of the pitch, unleashes one, and I'm saving it. I'm like, I've got this. I'm actually pulling off one into the top corner here. Sean St. Ledger sticks out his knee, comes off his knee, and it loops over me. 1-1 in the 94th minute. We win that game, and I firmly believe we were on the road to Rio.
Yeah, one of those qualification campaigns that as time goes on you kind of forget about. But yeah, just looking through the results, I was like, I remember that one. I remember that one as well. And that one, it's like, oh God, these games were all very tight.
Yeah.
And then the O'Neill Keane era, which I don't imagine how fascinating that was to be in those dressing rooms. Like, your opening of the book is that game away to Scotland when Sean Maloney scores, and then you and Roy Keane kind of having a bit of verbals, and like, there's 2 kind of tightly wound guys at the time, I'd say.
Absolutely, yeah.
What was that like?
That was a really interesting experience because kind of coming up to the build-up, there was a lot of talk of, the weeks and months before that about Shane coming out of retirement, coming back in. And I always felt like my position was being kind of undermined. And I do get that because that's part of being a goalkeeper and part of being #1 and part of football, that there's always conversations about your position, etc., etc. So we're building up to the game, and it was all about, at the time, Martin and Roy returning to paradise. Obviously, Martin was an exceptional manager for Celtic, one of their greatest ever, and then Roy spending some time towards the end of his career. Didn't go so well because of his hip and stuff, so they were returning back to the club. it took the heat off the team in terms of, right, the focus became primarily about the manager and the assistant manager. Whether that was done intentionally, I don't know. Maybe so, maybe not. And those conversations. So we've rocked up to the game, and I've gone out to start the game, and it was strange because Seamus McDonough, the goalkeeping coach, was with Shea over in the far corner, warming up with Shea, and Kieran Washwood had to warm me up. And I thought, right, there's, I'll let you draw the picture yourself. There's something not right there.
Yeah.
So before the game had even started, I was kind of like, right, pretty much incensed in that situation, and with the build up and everything else, and plus the pressure of the game. We're playing our local rivals, and it's the first time I got to play in Celtic Park as a kid. You always had your clubs, didn't you? I was like a Celtic fan, was my Scottish club. Liverpool was my English club. Real Madrid was my Spanish club. Inter Milan was my Italian club. So I'm over in Celtic Park, getting to play in Celtic Park, and I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. So the game kicks off. I get the ball. We're under a lot of pressure for the first 5-10 minutes. It was my first time hearing the Flower of Scotland. What a national anthem. The place was absolutely rocking. I remember thinking, wow, this is what a night. When you hear about all the best players in the world, Messi's, where's the best atmosphere? It's Celtic Park. And I was like, right, yeah, don't disagree with you here. It was phenomenal. So I'm in the middle of the goal. We're under pressure. Ball goes out for goal kick. I go place the ball down on the 6-yard box, and I kind of just have a little glance up out the corner of my eye, and I see Seamus is free. So by the time I put my head back down and place my hand on the ball and go to play the pass out to Seamus, he had gone to ground. So he just went, kill the game. I'll give it my hamstring or tight or my groin. I don't know what it was. So next time I passed the ball, and I'll never forget Richard Keogh's face. He was like a deer in the headlights. His eyes open up going, oh no, he doesn't realise Seamus is down. And he knew by the weight of the pass it wasn't for him, because I've absolutely laced it. So he overs it, lets it go through his legs, and it goes out towards the right wing. Seamus is lying on the floor looking at me. I'm looking at him going, oh no, oh please no. Naismith picks the ball up. He races down to the corner flag. He gets to the corner flag, whips one across the box, and I'm absolutely blessing myself. I'm like, oh, give me a one time here. Like, please don't score, please don't score, please don't score. Luckily, flashes across the box. Stephen Ward picks it up at the other corner flag, plays it up to McGeady. McGeady goes on an unbelievable mazy up the line. He's getting pelters because of his Scottish roots. Gets to the corner flag. We get a corner, and I'm like, there is a man above. Thank God for that. I'm okay. And I look out the corner of my eye, and Roy is staring at me like, and he's ranting and raving. He's got his World Cups on. He's got his socks pulled up. He's ready for war. He's ready for battle. He's got his shorts on. I'd say he was probably like, I'd love to be out there tonight. He's got his jacket open, and I think at the time he had that wild beard, and he's ranting and raving at me. And I don't know, have you been to Celtic Park? One of the away team dugout is like quite far down the pitch, and it's close to the 18-yard box. So we weren't.
You were near him.
Yeah, we were close. So he's ranting and raving at me, and a few explicits come out, and it just absolutely triggered me. And I've just ran over to the corner of the box, and I'm just like, you'd probably better off reading it in the book. It's actually quite funny. And it led to that space, and it just kind of spiraled from that place. The funny thing is everybody missed it.
The
and the power of distraction. Yeah, everyone was looking at the ball. Power of distraction was amazing. There was probably one person that only seen that incident in the whole place. In front of 60-odd thousand was my brother-in-law. He was up in the stands, and obviously he was watching me, and he was like, came to me after the game. He was like, what actually happened there?
Roy.
What happened with myself and Roy, yeah. So, and then Martin decided to join in. Then I'm having a go at Martin.
The double act.
As well, like the double act. And I was genuinely unhinged. I was actually like, I'm going to murder the Perry. No joking. And back then I was in my absolute 6'4", 8% body fat. I was in my prime, and ready for war. And like that, I was just feeling that I was protecting my position and my place. But it taught me about my own ego and my own identity, and dealing with men in power in those positions. It was quite a foolish thing for me to do.
You didn't
I paid
end
the
up,
consequences of it.
But why? So you didn't end up obviously taking them on. How did that kind of diffuse, or did it?
Well, we get into the change room, half time. were having the stare off, and I wasn't relenting. I should have just held my hand up and said, right, no problem, just let it go. Like him, I couldn't let it go. We're probably similar, like-minded. And after the game rolls on, you can read about it in the book, and that was in the November. So then we did a video the next day. That was another scenario, and roll on then to March, where it was, I think we were playing Poland. I'm number one, absolutely flying. Form is excellent, and we get called in just before the game. We arrive at the Aviva. My number one peg is there. I walk over to my peg, walk out to the pitch just to check what the pitch conditions were. Sprinklers come on. I'm walking off the pitch again. Martin O'Neill comes over. Martin says, David, can I have a chat with you? I said, yeah. And I thought he was going to tell me about some sort of tactics, or I want you to do X, Y, and Z. Or are you looking forward to the game? Or, we used to have some great chats before games. And he goes, I've got a hunch tonight. I'm going to go with Shea. And for a split second, I was just shocked. I just absolutely mentally and emotionally vacated the building. He was like talking, and I was just hearing these sounds, and I was trying to figure out what had just happened. And I just said, yeah, gaffer, whatever is best for the team or whatever else. And I remember just walking back in, and so yeah, it started to unravel then. And then that was pretty much my time with the national team started to unravel from.
Yeah, because there's one last moment that I didn't really realise or forgotten, that so Germany come to town, then eventually in the qualifying campaign, Shea gets injured, and you're fully sure you're getting the call, not Darren Randolph. Like Darren Randolph's kind of international career starts in that moment.
About that,
and you're like you're kind of warming you up, and you're like, this is my moment, I'm back in business.
Yeah.
And then Darren, you're going on, and you kind of both look at each other.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Yeah, it was actually hilarious. Well, it wasn't so funny at the time, and Shea goes down injured with his knee, and I can actually hear him on the pitch. He's like, "Tell Forde to get ready. Tell Forde to get ready." It was like the Dr. Alan Byrne and the physios go sprinting onto the pitch. They're like, "Right, we need to get a keeper on Shea's obviously injured." So I go down into the tunnel, and Darren goes, "Oh, do you want to just get your hands in, locked in? We're playing Germany, So I go down, put my pads in. He's volleying balls at me down inside and under the tunnel. And next thing, Seamus comes around the corner, and he goes, "Right, Darren, you're on." And the two of us look at each other, and we're like, well, probably I should have been warming you up, but we hadn't got a clue who was who or what position or what role. And the hunch that he went on that night paid off. He smashed the ball down the pitch, and we go on to win 1-0, and it was a massive win. And oftentimes you think to yourself, well, you hear the saying so many times, are you better to be a lucky manager than a good manager? And that's not disrespect saying that he's not a good manager. He's been a phenomenal manager, and he's in a phenomenal career. But where that was for me personally, and how much that actually that hurt big time. Yeah,
I said another interesting footnote from the book, just that kind of sliding doors moment where you're like, wait, I thought I was going on. Just before we wrap up then, as I said, so many interesting stories, details in the book, a great insight into the life of a professional footballer, not at the top of the game. How are you doing today? Are you in a good place now? Your kind of playing days, in the rearview mirror. How are you in 2025?
Couldn't be better. I've finally come to the conclusion. I found a career that I'm decent at, and the work I do now with my company, Pathfinder Coaching and Development, it was all with the long-term plan back then of aiming towards that, because I started to see that mental health and emotional resilience and well-being was a big problem. And I knew that, right, this is something I can do in the future, and lo and behold, here I am today doing that work in terms of how I can utilise my experiences through the work that I've done in terms of getting my mind right, getting myself right, looking at my personal and professional development, and thankfully, family's healthy, all's going well at the moment, and I'm living my best life. Honest to God, look, that was my profession. I definitely feel like I found my vocation, and they're two totally different things. So the work I do now, taking people around the world, transformational travel experiences to India, to America, visiting the Native Americans, doing so many exciting things and having so many amazing experiences, you know, teaching meditation, teaching pranayama, breathing techniques, different elements, and, you know, corporate coaching, executive mentoring, whatever you want to do, and even working with footballers and different people. And I've such a variety in my life. There's such fun in my life and such freedom in my life. And as I said, I couldn't actually be happier, and it's been so worthwhile doing it and being able to capture that in a story and realise, right, that's been one part of my life. Now it's on to the next journey. And oftentimes a lot of footballers get caught in that, because what happens after football? How do they replace that? And I transitioned into that. You know, it wasn't easy, but it was actually so worth it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Oh, great to hear you're doing so well. David Forde, the author of Being the One. Thanks so much for coming in.
Will, thanks a million for having me. It's been great.
Cheers David.